I'll admit, I was a little skeptical when I heard that Resident Evil Village was coming to the Mac this year. After all, gaming on the Mac is basically a meme at this point, right? Nobody buys a Mac to play games because, well, most games aren't there in the first place, and the ones that are there are going to be old and probably run poorly compared to a similarly priced PC. But Apple Silicon is kind of amazing, and Resident Evil Village was my favorite game of last year, so my interest was at least piqued. I'm showing video here of the game running on a baseline 14-inch MacBook Pro with an M1 Pro processor. I'd love to show you more devices, but this is the only Mac I own, so this is what I can show off. Now, I am sad to say that in the great tradition of Mac gaming, this is not the best version of this game you can get today. And if you can play it on the PC, PlayStation 4 or 5, Xbox, whatever, I'd suggest playing it on one of those instead. See, the Mac version is just the original game, but every other version you can get on these other platforms has additional content, a new third-person mode, and an entirely new story expansion, none of which is there on the Mac right now. So yeah, the Mac version is 18 months late, and it doesn't have all the features of the other versions of the game, but beggars can't be choosers, right? This does leave the question of how the game runs though, so let's take a look at performance. So for the past year, I've been playing the game on a PC with the specs listed here, and it's an awesome experience. Like, I can play with all settings maxed out at 4K with a completely smooth 60 FPS, and I was curious to see how this would run on a Mac laptop at that. At first, honestly, I was a little terrified that the days of bad Mac gaming were still upon us because the game did not run well my first time I played it. I started it up and it seemed to be going pretty well, but within the first 10 minutes, things just started to get worse and worse to the point where the game was completely unplayable and there were no graphic settings I could turn down to improve things. It was just tanking. It was absolute garbage. So I got to the first save point, I closed the game, I cooled off for a little bit, and then I restarted it, and this time I was using the Metal 3 Performance HUD so that I could see exactly in real time how things were behaving, what my frame rates were, and all that good stuff. To my surprise, it was actually suddenly great. With the visuals turned down and the resolution admittedly pretty low, I was getting around 100 FPS and the game felt great. Now, it did look pretty terrible due to the resolution, so I bumped that up to 1440p and set the textures back to high, and sure enough, I was still getting a really good experience that kind of blew me away. Again, this is a baseline 14-inch MacBook Pro, so in theory, it's only going to get better with higher-end devices. But this was just all playing on the laptop monitor. I wanted to see how it would work in a more realistic experience, for me at least, playing on a 4K 144Hz display. I wanted to see how that was going to behave. So when I plugged it into the monitor, I was playing at 4K with Metal FX upscaling set to quality. Okay, now quick aside here to talk about Metal FX upscaling. It's kind of hard to explain, so I'm not going to go into details, but basically it's an upscaling technique that allows the GPU to render out a lower resolution image, and then it's upscaled to whatever resolution you've chosen, but without it actually looking like it was just stretched out and blurred and everything to fill it up. It does a better job of that. NVIDIA is currently the market leader here with the DLSS, which is awesome, and I use in every game that it's available because it gives you a huge performance boost. I'll try to put the Metal FX performance boost that I was able to measure over here. But yeah, it gives you a performance boost. DLSS is the current market leader. AMD has a solution called FSR. Intel has one called XESS. So there's a bunch of solutions out there. This is Apple's version for games built on Metal. And I would say it's not the best. It's definitely not as good as DLSS, but it's better than actually just playing at a lower resolution and having it stretch and be all blurry. It does a better job of that, but it's just not perfect. So hopefully that was a little bit helpful, but I'm not Digital Foundry. That's about as deep as I can go on this. So anyway, back to the video. I'm playing now at 4K with Metal FX upscaling set to quality, and all the graphical settings are set to high as well. So there's really no compromises here, maybe except for the Metal upscaling. But I'm still running at nearly 60 FPS. So if you're okay with that, then you're good. You can play this with no compromises to the visual settings, basically. But if you did want to make sure it's a reliable 60, you could drop the resolution down to something like 1440p. You could set the graphic settings instead of high, set them to medium, or you could set Metal FX upscaling to performance instead of quality. So you have options here. Honestly, I'm pretty impressed with how this game runs on my Mac. Like, obviously, it wasn't going to be realistic for it to outperform a gaming PC from just a couple years ago, but the fact that it gets pretty close is pretty remarkable. And so I think that it's a combination of this game being well tuned to Metal and just the raw performance of Apple Silicon devices. add up to a really good experience. So I still stand by my opinion that if you can play this game conveniently on a PC, a PlayStation, or an Xbox, you should play it there because it plays great and has more content available, and it might even be cheaper depending on the day. But I get that some people don't have those options, or they just want to be able to play on their laptop. So if that describes you, if that second group describes you, and you want to enjoy this game, I think the Mac version is surprisingly good for those of us on Apple Silicon Macs. But anyway, that's it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you here next time. Bye-bye.